Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Jonathan Casillas. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. Hit us up on Twitter, hashtag Giants Chat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So we are continuing our opponent previews today. Two teams on deck. First the Saints, then the Rams. So let's turn our attention to Week 15. Giants will head to the Big Easy to battle the New Orleans Saints. And to get more into what to expect from the Saints in 2023, we bring in a man who covers the NFL as well as the Saints for The Athletic, none other than Larry Holder. Larry, got Lance Medow, Jonathan Casillas here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
All is well here. Definitely a season that I think is going to be an interesting one down here in New Orleans after a couple of really some lackluster football. We're not accustomed to that in New Orleans. And so, yeah, I'll be curious to see how this team responds this year.
And, Larry, let's start with your last point because I would say that's a product partially of the revolving door at quarterback since Drew Brees retired. They make the big splash. They bring in Derek Carr, a two-parter for you. How much does he stabilize the position under center? And, B, how do you see him meshing with what Pete Carmichael is running on the offensive side of the ball?
He certainly stabilizes the quarterback carousel. I mean, look, the Saints, they've started multiple quarterbacks in the last couple of years for multiple reasons. I mean, they've gone from Jameis Winston to Taysom Hill to Andy Dalton, Trevor Siemian. Even Ian Book got a start,
sure.
Which was that was COVID related, but still, it just goes to show you how much of an uncertainty quarterback's been ever since Drew Brees retired. And look, Derek Carr, that's someone they had to acquire, no matter really how it was. He was the best quarterback option that was available. They were able to wait it out, not have to trade for him, get him free agency. But yeah, I think he definitely stabilizes what they could do there. And like, do I think that Pete Carmichael and Derek Carr can they mesh well? I really think they can. And when you look at Derek Carr's style, he's more similar to Drew Brees than maybe some of the other quarterbacks that they've had to deploy the last couple of years. Pocket guy, known for a lot for his accuracy, even though that went down a bit last year under the 1 year with Josh McDaniels. But it definitely goes more along to the offense they're used to running in New Orleans over the last 15, 16 years with Sean Payton and Drew Brees.
Yeah, we're going to stick to the quarterback room, Larry. What's up, man? Good to talk to you again. It's JC here, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I know, right?
It's been a long time since I've seen you in a locker room down here. But, yeah, definitely great to catch up with you.
And this team looks a lot different than when I played down in New Orleans, of course. I think the main thing being that Drew Brees is not there. But there's a guy, Taysom Hill, who played quarterback when Drew Brees was healthy. And he did a lot of things at different positions, at the quarterback position, tight end, wide receiver, running back positions. Where do you see Taysom Hill fitting into this situation now that Derek Carr is the guy at quarterback? And unlike Drew Brees, because we all know I love Drew Brees, and I think this is a credit to him and even expands his greatness that he doesn't have a strong arm. I think that was pretty much evident and known, and Taysom Hill kind of came in sometimes to throw those deep passes down the field. I don't think that's a problem with Derek Carr. Where do you see Taysom Hill fitting into possibly the quarterback room, or what position is he actually playing?
Well, he'll play several positions, I think, still. And it's funny that Taysom Hill would answer questions this offseason about where he's going to be playing. He's listed as a tight end, but still took snaps at quarterback during the early part of this offseason. And I still think that Taysom will play an element of quarterback in terms of almost being like that wildcat guy, but we know he has the ability to throw the football. But I still think they're going to sprinkle him in. I would assume that this was discussed when Derek Carr was brought in, that this will be part of the offense still. But I do think that they would like to involve Taysom Hill more outside of playing quarterback, because last year with the run game, he was probably the best weapon in the run game, and that was playing at quarterback. And so I think that just goes to show you where that the offense was a little bit stagnant and needed his spark. But I would assume that he will still get some snaps, but will it be? I think it's going to depend on the game in terms of percentages. But I know they would like to put him more involved in, say, a tight end or as a receiver. I think they would still like to use him on special teams. But also, we have to remember, it's not like he's young. I mean, he's in his mid-30s, so it's not. You don't want to get so much wear and tear on him where he's going to be hurt. I mean, because they got people 10 years younger than him trying to play special teams and trying to do all these other things. But still, I think they will still use him at quarterback. But I don't know if they have a complete plan of how often they're going to use him.
In terms of the other weapons around Derek Carr, you look at the receiving core, Larry, and unfortunately, Michael Thomas, the last time he played a full season, I think Jonathan Casillas was in a Saints uniform. So, and you can attest to that given how much he's been in and out of the lineup. Chris Olave obviously had a very productive rookie year, and I thought Rashid Shaheed showed some nice flashes as a weapon, even out of the backfield. What would you say is the current state of this receiving core, and how much can New Orleans bank on Michael Thomas being a reliable weapon this year?
I don't want to age JC, but that's probably Marcus Colston territory.
That's right, yeah.
There you go.
Sure. Product of Hofstra, that's right.
Yes, sir.
But no, look, I do think that we're in see it, believe it mode with Mike Thomas. Look, he played a couple of games last year and got hurt. He was playing well when he played, but I think it's been massive frustration on both sides for Michael Thomas and the Saints. Look, do I think Chris Olave could be a number one receiver in the league? I think that still remains to be seen. I would almost put him as a 1A. But do I think he's someone who can really match with Derek Carr? I think absolutely. What we saw from Rashid Shaheed last year in spurts, I think there's definitely some promise there. So you would put Michael Thomas and Chris Olave and Shaheed as some of that top of the depth chart guys. But the Saints went out and basically signed every free agent with some sort of experience they could to see who can kind of stick. They signed Brian Edwards, they signed James Washington, Lim Bowden, Kike Kuti, and you throw him in there with Traquan Smith, and then they drafted A.C. Perry, and so they're basically trying to find guys who can really do something within this offense, because they really lacked explosiveness in the passing game last year. Chris Olave was really the only weapon that they had at wide receiver. Shaheed came on later, but wasn't this is overwhelming success. I think he's got promise. So that you can really offensively, you could point to almost every spot and have a question. But yeah, the receiver group, Olave is going to be there for the long term. But can Michael Thomas be anywhere near what he was? I think I'm not going to assume he will be. I've got to see it to believe it.
Larry, I'm taking a look at the running back room and Alvin Kamara in 2020. I mean, what he did on Christmas, 6 touchdowns, was it? I mean, we've never seen anything like that with those shoes that he had on. And he had a great year that year. He averaged 5 yards a carry. The last 2 years, we've seen a drop-off with him only scoring 6 touchdowns in the last 2 years. His yards per carry being basically lower than 4.0 yards per carry, and they were 5 yards per carry in 2020. But you guys went out and signed Jamal Williams, who led the league in touchdowns last year in 17. Who is the guy at running back now? Because they're both similar in age, if I'm not mistaken. Kamara was shake and bake with my guy Mark Ingram, and they had a great 1-2 punch. Who is the guy that's going to get the bulk of the carries this year? Is it going to be Williams, who kind of coming off a career year in Detroit, or Alvin Kamara, who's coming off basically a low a career year in last year in Alvin Kamara?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the availability of Alvin Kamara. He pleads no contest involving an incident a couple of years ago at the Pro Bowl. Now the NFL, we're kind of waiting for that shoe to drop. Him potentially being suspended. I would assume he's going to be suspended for some period of time. I think that's part of the reason why they brought Jamal Williams in, is he's capable of kind of being that bell cow when Kamara is suspended. But also, you mentioned the dip in Kamara's production. He was at his best when he had kind of a 1-2 punch. And you mentioned Mark Ingram, and they had definitely some good years together. And Mark really wasn't the same guy last year. And so I think Kamara really struggled when he had to be the quote-unquote bell cow. He's not getting 300 carries, but 200-something. That's not what you want to do. You want to be able to move Kamara outside of the backfield, use him as a receiver, and the Saints were more limited with that. And look, they're paying him a ton of money, so they're expecting production. So I think that they needed Jamal Williams to kind of be the complement there, and to be able to do it when Kamara suspended. And also, Taysom Hill led the team in rushing touchdowns last year, was goal line guy. I mean, Jamal Williams is definitely goal line guy. So I think the Saints feel a lot more confident having Jamal in there. So, I think that the Saints needed to add a veteran guy. And, I think that's a really good sneaky pickup with Jamal Williams. And he might be one of the more sneaky good pickups league-wide in free agency.
Yeah, especially to your point, Larry, finishing in the red zone, which is so key, because if you can't punch it in, all those drives are just going to add up to field goals, and that's not really going to help your cause. As we're talking with Larry Holder, covers the NFL and the Saints for The Athletic. Last area that I want to touch on the offensive side of the ball, you brought up Taysom Hill, and we know he's a jack of all trades, but I think other weapons that get overlooked, Larry, Juwan Johnson became a big red zone target. Clearly, it was a different group of quarterbacks. And Foster Moreau has chemistry with Derek Carr based on their days with the Raiders. We know Carr was with Darren Waller, who's now with the Giants. How much more do you think they're going to get out of Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau, that chemistry with Derek Carr? How much could that present another weapon that they could target throughout the course of drives or as well as in the red zone area?
Yeah, I think the Saints, having Derek Carr, and he's used to having a good rapport with tight ends. I mean, you mentioned Waller, and obviously with Foster with the Raiders, and I think Foster was kind of that perfect pickup to be the 1A tight end. I mean, he could be a receiver, he could be a blocker, and Juwan Johnson, he's a converted wide receiver. He's finally really made his mark as being that pass-catching threat, and so I think that when you combine Carr's ability to play with the tight end, and then you throw Taysom Hill in the mix, I do feel like they've got a good group. Now, I don't know how much blocking you want to do with Juwan Johnson or Taysom Hill.
Sure.
And Foster can play that role. I know they signed a veteran Jesse James as well, who could probably do that as well. But yeah, I do think that they definitely have more options at tight end than they did last year for sure, when Johnson was really coming kind of in on his own and learning to position and be a receiver. So yeah, the fact that they can match there more than they have in the past, combined with Carr's ability to implement the tight end very well, could be an aspect that really might actually, if they have weaknesses at wide receiver, they might have a little bit more strength and versatility at tight end.
Last question for the offense, right? We're going to look at this offensive line, and when I think offensive line for the Saints, I'm thinking of Jermon Bushrod, I'm thinking of Jari Evans, John Stinchcomb, John Goody. How does these guys now, of course, these guys that I just listed were the guys we won a Super Bowl with back in 2009, how do they stack up to that offensive line, which was able to protect Drew Brees, and they did a phenomenal job for years together?
Yeah, Jesse, that's like the hallmark. Sean Payton builds that offensive line and made kind of the world go round with the offense. And, for years, even after that unit moved on. Look, the Saints for years had Teron Armstead, and look, Ryan Ramczyk emerged as one of the best right tackles in the NFL, and he's had a little bit of ups and downs the last year or two, but I mean, I think that goes hand in hand trying to figure out who you got at quarterback as well. So when you look at it, if everybody is right, I think this offensive line can be, I'll say, a top 10 offensive line, but I feel like they've been banged up a decent bit through the years. Trevor Penning, drafted last year, they want him to be their left tackle of the future. He's banged up, but he would be, if he would be healthy, he'd be their starter. Andres has been there for a long time. Eric McCoy, I feel like, is one of the better centers in the NFL. Cesar Ruiz, who's another former first-round pick, he's in a contract year. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option, so this is an important year, but I do feel like he was making some strides. So if they could stay on the field and play together, I do think that it can kind of get this offense going. But there was too many moving parts, injuries, and some inconsistencies there that, look, for the Saints offense to be more of a weapon, I do think that they need to stabilize it. And so if they're starting five that they would have pegged ready to go, I do think that they could be better than what they've been in the past, say, 2 years.
Larry, you look at their defense last season, I think this gets overlooked because of some of the offensive struggles that we were talking about. They were a top 10 unit in the NFL last season. If their offense gave them a little bit more, who knows? They may have been able to survive a down year in the NFC South, but they lost a boatload of talent up front in the front seven. We're talking about Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis at linebacker. I know they drafted 2 guys. They brought in a few free agents. How have the dynamics changed up front, and are you anticipating a drop-off, or do you think that Dennis Allen and Joe Woods will be able to maintain that strength up front?
Yeah, and they lost Ryan Nielsen to the Falcons. I mean, you mentioned Joe Woods, so new defensive coordinator there. But, look, Dennis is really calling the shots on defense. So, that's Joe Woods is there to kind of guide it when he's having to be head coaching duties, but Dennis is going to be that defensive guru there. But, yeah, it's definitely a different look. There's no question about it. And while they were still able to sack the quarterback, they weren't getting as much pressure, say, when they were good at sacks. But they were on the bottom half last year in terms of pressure percentage, and that's not the norm for this defense for the last several years. That's become a strength, and last year for sure it was the strength of the team. And you're looking across the defensive line, you've got 3 new starters with Nathan Shepard, Kalen Saunders, and Carl Granderson. And the Saints also knew that they had to get younger there. They drafted rounds 1 and 2 new pieces, Brian Brzee and Isaiah Foskey. Isaiah's an edge guy, and coming in, they have high hopes for both of those guys. It's definitely a different unit, and I'm curious to see how they kind of mold together. And the rest of the defense, I think they're one of the best linebackers, even though he's in his mid-30s. Demario Davis is playing as well as anybody, and I feel like that secondary can be a strength. So I feel like it's going to come down to that front 4. Be able to create pressure without blitzing, and of course dialing up blitzes when you can. And so I think that's Cam Jordan's that Iron Man guy, and you wonder how much he's got left in the tank. He still can play, but he can't do it alone. And they had to draft guys because someone like Peyton Turner, they drafted first round a couple years ago, has not lived up to the first round status. Marcus Davenport, they let walk because he didn't consistently live up to that first-round status. I'm sure they're probably wishing they had gone a different direction, kept Trey Hendrickson instead of banking on Marcus Davenport because Trey has shined with the Bengals.
Yeah.
So, but, you got to make moves. And, the Saints kind of live by the sword. They're always on salary cap edge. So they play it a little wilder than a lot of teams. But, yeah, I do think, though, that going into this season, the Saints defense is still the strength because I need to see if the offense can gel and be better. So they're going to be leaning probably early on that defense to really kind of keep them in games while the offense kind of gets their act together.
Larry, I wasn't watching the Saints as much as I was watching the Giants last year, of course, obviously, right? And I look at Brian Breesy. I've been following the kids in high school. He went to Clemson, had a great career, of course, up and down with his, his health and stuff like that. And I look at Isaiah Foskey. He's probably going to play opposite of Cam Jordan. Now, Cam Jordan was a draft pick when I was in New Orleans, right? And he came in 2011, and he's been a stalwart since then, right? A bell cow along that defensive line, a guy that's going to create havoc in the backfield, get to the quarterback, create turnovers, whatever it is, play 90% of the snaps. But he's in his 13th year. Does Cam Jordan still have juice left to solidify the Saints' defensive line? Does he, Larry?
He's got enough juice. I'll tell you, he's their best option of what they have right now.
Right.
I mean, I think that's where we are with that. He's an every down guy. You don't get a lot of every down guys as much as we used to. A lot of rotational guys. I think it would probably aid him if he could have someone that could be in rotation with him. I look almost like the Eagles. Look, Brandon Graham was able to be a rotation guy, and he's able to be more effective that way.
Yep.
Yeah, he's able to be more effective that way rather than playing 70, 80, 90% of the snaps that they're going to probably still ask Cam Jordan to do. And he's, him, he's not going to say, "Oh, take me out." No chance in hell is that's going to happen. But still, I do think that is something that we all know, and he knows, and he's not been shy about talking about this. He might have 1 or 2 years left in him, so the Saints definitely need to get younger. I mean, there's a reason why they wouldn't drafted Foskey. Carl Granderson is a piece that he's getting better, but we don't know if he's an every down piece. I wouldn't say he is. So, Cam Jordan's the guy in the marquee along that defensive line. They need more from some of these guys we've been talking about because, look, Father Time always kind of catches up with you at some point. So they need to be able to have some compliments to Cam Jordan to make this thing work.
Larry, before we let you go, big picture perspective question. I referenced the fact that the NFC South had that down year last season, and we had the NFC East go through something similar a few years prior. If you look at NFL history, highly unlikely history is going to repeat itself. 1 or 2 of these teams is going to bounce back. I think most think New Orleans has the best answer under center because they have the most polished, proven guy in Derek Carr. How do you see this division playing out this year? Are the Saints the team to beat? Or because of some of the questions we talked about on offense, maybe a young Carolina team emerges, or Baker works his magic with Tampa Bay, or maybe you like this Atlanta team that has retooled its defense?
Yeah, the Saints are the best team in the worst division. So if that's the case, you get in the tournament and go to playoffs, and then you see what happens. But I do think, quarterback, that alone makes them the favorite, and their defense, I think, is a solid unit. The team that I might see as someone who could sneak up on them might be Atlanta. I think they've gotten better on defense. They've added a ton of pieces. I know, highlighted by Jesse Bates. We mentioned earlier that Ryan Nielsen is now their defensive coordinator. I always thought he was kind of a rising coach in the ranks, and now he's getting the opportunity to do that. You add Bijan Robinson over there.
Sure.
They've got a nice stable of running backs. Desmond Ridder is certainly a question mark, but still, you're wondering if Arthur Smith might use Robinson in the same way he uses Derrick Henry. And that worked in Tennessee. Still, I do think, though, that I'd be hard-pressed to go against that. The Saints are the favorite in that division. Maybe Carolina if Bryce Young can play well early. I don't trust Tampa at all. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the number 1 overall pick next year, maybe the number 2 overall pick. But, I think it's not a slam dunk for the Saints, but I do think you look at it all, and the Saints make sense to be the favorite in that division.
You said the best team in the worst division. I want to flash back to you. It gives me nightmares. 2010, New Orleans had a great record. I don't remember exactly what our record was, but we were the best team in the NFC South. And we
11-5, JC.
And we play Seattle Seahawks. Right. Yeah. They were the best team in the worst division. I think they were like 7-9. It was like the first time the team like that got into the playoffs. And did they beat us? Oh, man, with that Marshawn Lynch earthquake, Marshawn Lynch beastquake run. And I remember because I was sitting home, I was on injured reserve that year. But that gives us a little bit of hope, with the New Orleans Saints being the best team in the worst division, because a team like that has won a game before.
Oh, I covered that game, AC. I remember Beastquake. So, yeah, I definitely remember that. And look, there was no Super Bowl hangover for the Saints year, so look, they played very well to come back there. But yeah, look, I'll liken it to as long as you get to the tournament, in the playoffs, you got a shot.
That's right.
Giants history. They've certainly done that and shown that.
Sure.
Get in, and you could be the bottom seed and win it all. So yeah, as long as you can get in, it doesn't matter what your record is. And so yeah, I'm with you. Like that's the thing. Like Saints fans, they're a little leery, but down here, but still, I do think that they understand if they win a division, okay, then you figure it out. That's we'll use a Louisiana term. That's lagniappe. That's the bonus. So let's see how it. Yeah, exactly. So let's see how this works. But yeah, I do think that I think Saints fans are satisfied. They know the division's not that great comparatively speaking, but they'd rather be the best team in the worst division than the worst team in the best division or something. Some sort of crazy influence there. So yeah, I do think that there's definitely some silver lining in what I'm saying. So you don't want to be the worst team in the worst division.
No,
so, hey,
not at all.
You're the favorite in the worst division. That means you're finishing first and getting into the playoffs.
Sure. Go, no, it puts things in perspective. Week 15, Giants visit the Saints, 1 p.m. Eastern in the Big Easy. He is Larry Holder, who covers the NFL and the Saints for The Athletic. Larry, greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and we look forward to talking down the road. Thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, catching up with you guys. Take care.
Nice talking
to
you
as well.
Larry.
Our pleasure. That was Larry Holder weighing in on the Saints. A few reminders here before we turn our attention to the second team on the agenda, the Giants Huddle podcast. You can check that out on giants.com/podcasts, and you can also review it on your favorite podcast platform. The 2023 NFL schedule, which we are previewing, is officially out. Single game tickets, they're on sale now. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. Visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. And speaking of the upcoming season, you can take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And last but not least, the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. So we previewed the Saints. Now let's turn our attention to the NFC West, because later in the season, Week 17, the Giants will host the Rams here at MetLife Stadium, 1 p.m. Eastern. And this was a Rams team that was hit by the injury bug last season, which would explain why they were on the outside looking in after, of course, winning the Super Bowl. And to preview what to expect from L.A. this season, we are joined by the Rams radio play-by-play announcer, none other than J.B. Long. J.B., you got Lance Medow, Jonathan Casillas here on Giants.com, Big Blue Kickoff Live. Always appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Yeah, it's going great. Good afternoon, Lance and Jonathan. Thank you for having me. And I guess our New Year's Eve kickoff gets us in just under the wire. We can call this a 2023 preview after all, can't we?
There you go. That is extremely fitting. That's right. We don't have to turn the calendar to 2024 so quickly. And the Rams, JB, I think it's fair to say, are anxious to turn the page from 2022. They were not active in free agency. I don't think anybody was surprised based on the salary cap limitations, but based on the 14 draft picks, I want to speak general topic here before we delve into the meat and potatoes. How much is this a youth movement this season where the Rams sort of are forcing themselves into, they have to develop and they have to tap into more of a depth chart because the top heaviness of this roster is getting up there in age?
Yeah, those are all good points, and it is kind of turning the consensus argument against the Rams on its head a little bit in that, trading all their picks to go all in, if that's the external narrative, actually turned out to the largest draft class in franchise history this spring, in a situation where they now have all of their future picks moving forward. So like much of life in the NFL, things move quickly, and what's true yesterday is probably not going to be tomorrow. But the Rams will report to camp, as you kind of hinted at, Lance, with essentially half of its 90-man roster being rookies, more than half having never played a snap in the National Football League. That's a far cry from a Super Bowl defense just one summer ago. Like all teams, hope springs eternal. This is the spring training of football, and the Rams, we'll find out. They're either lying to us or lying to themselves. In terms of what they think they're going to be. There's a very subtle confidence internally. There was a great energy, which sounds like an off-season trope, to OTAs. So believe me, I get that the rubber has not met the road yet. But I think Sean McVay is pretty freely comparing this vibe to what he inherited in his first year in 2017 when they made the jump from 4-12 in the final year of Jeff Fisher's leadership to 11-5 and a playoff spot under Sean.
Is this a rebuilding year for the Rams? I mean, Jalen Ramsey's gone, but I think you returned 3 of your top 4 players in Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stafford, excuse me. Is this a rebuilding year, though, for the Rams, you thinking?
Jonathan, speaking for the kind of front office, you are welcome to use any R word you would like except for rebuilding. Reset, restructure, revamp, rejuvenate, those are all fine. Rebuilding, they will not go with. Renovation with 3 load-bearing walls, as they like to say, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford.
I like that one.
Yes. Look, I think, I'm sure you've touched on this, whether it's in your Saints conversation or otherwhere throughout your show. The NFC is wide open, not just for this year, but if you look at kind of the intermediate 3 to 5 year horizon, a lot of the young, talented quarterbacks reside in the AFC. A lot of the offseason frenzy has gone in that direction. So I think the Rams are going to take a look this year. And what I mean by that is they're making a bet on their internal group, including those 3 superstars. They are trying to draft and develop some younger, less expensive talent. And if they hit on some of those, and if they can get the health pendulum to swing the other way, maybe they get to the trade deadline with all of their draft inventory and say, hey, we're running first or second in the NFC West. We're solidly in a wild card position. If there's an option to get better at a position of need, corner, edge rusher, receiver, you name it, maybe we start our foot to the floor mentality again sooner rather than waiting for the 2024 offseason, which has been pitched to the fan base as directly as through, an open letter to our season ticket members from our COO, Kevin Demoff.
JB, I referenced the fact that they were hammered by injuries last season all across the board. Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, the offensive line was a game of musical chairs, as you can attest to. Cam Akers started off in the doghouse, then all of a sudden he came back into the mix. If I remove Cooper Kupp from the equation, because we're talking about one of the best weapons receivers in the game, what other element, now that health is back to norm, is going to be, in your opinion, the X factor on the offensive side of the ball?
Sean McVay getting back to his identity and his bread and butter. I totally get where you're coming from. I'm not immune to the fact that a lot of, external sources have rated the Rams skill group as one of the lowest in the National Football League, and really their roster across the board as being in the bottom tier. I get it. I understand why there are not a lot of household names other than the ones we've already mentioned. But I think Sean McVay has proven that, if you go back to his first offseason, there wasn't a lot to write home about in terms of offensive skill. Next thing you know, they draft Cooper Kupp, they trade for Sammy Watkins, they sign Robert Woods, and they live in 11 personnel and set the world afire for the better part of 2 really productive offensive seasons. Now, they've structured it differently, no doubt, with Matthew Stafford at the controls than they did with, the Jared Goff early McVay years. But I think there is a continuity to be had up front with an offensive line that now I think is one of the deepest and strongest position groups on their team, even though it was an utter disaster last season. I think that swings around in their favor, and they can get back to some of the staples that have made them really successful. And maybe if the offense looks like it did for Jared Goff, but you have the arm talent, savvy experience of Matthew Stafford willing to operate it, I think there's a happy medium to be found there with the running game of Cam Akers doing his best Todd Gurley impersonation if you really want to force it back to the 17-18 offensive years.
I'm looking at the draft pick that you guys got from Ole Miss, Zach Evans. I know he's had a lot of off-the-field stuff going on, but you guys basically got a steal in him. I like the way he played football in the SEC, doing his thing down there, which is a hard division to play in, and you guys got him as a late draft pick, as a steal. What is the expectations, if any, with Zach Evans?
Yeah, I think this is a really great training camp opportunity for him because Cam Akers is your established starter, and he came on really strong in the back 6 games of last season, was as productive as any back in the league, and that was with a completely depleted offensive line and Baker Mayfield playing quarterback for the most part. So I know they're high on what this fourth year from Akers can bring. But Evans has a chance to be his backup. He'll be battling with Kyron Williams, who was a day 2 pick last year, or day 3 pick last year, beg your pardon, out of Notre Dame, and had an injury-disrupted offseason program, then training camp, then regular season. So I don't think we've seen what he can truly offer a professional franchise yet. Maybe he'll be slotted in that third down back role, or perhaps Sony Michel, who they just added late this summer, who was a critical piece, I think, of their Super Bowl run, just adding some veteran presence, some pass protection, some reliability in terms of assignment, might be able to carve out that third running back spot, in which case Evans may be on the outside, practice squad looking in if he can't supersede some of those other names.
JB, whenever you talk about a quarterback that is dealing with concussion issues and back issues, not to say that you ever go into a season hoping that he gets hurt again, but I think the Rams at least need to prepare accordingly. God forbid Stafford does miss time. They drafted Stetson Bennett, coincidentally another Georgia guy. They brought in Brett Rippon. What does the depth chart look like in the event that Sean McVay has to once again navigate being without his starting quarterback? And granted, you got to give him credit. They did a really nice job bringing in Baker. He got off the plane. He came in that primetime game. He worked his magic. So they've got a good track record. But where is the substance, I guess, in connection to that?
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a stock buyback here, if you'll allow the comparison to Wall Street, right? Where your stock has been discounted, and I think the Rams as an organization are buying up some of those loose shares. Like they're saying the partnership of Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford has been dented, has been discounted. We'll gladly re-up. We'll gladly bring some of that back in-house because as we survey the NFC West specifically and then the broader NFC picture, there aren't many coaching quarterback tandems that we'd rather have. Now, I get it. Stafford's in his mid-30s now. He's had an injury-prone career, though the reputation has always been the toughness and the ability to play through that and to deliver great statistics, if not always win through the pain. So I think he's got like comeback player of the year potential across the National Football League. But if that's not the case, they did just draft Baker Mayfield's replacement in Stetson Bennett, which is the first quarterback the Rams have drafted in the Sean McVay era, in the Sean McVay-Les Snead partnership. And it was fascinating to see how much they coveted Bennett's skill set, and not just because he won a national championship at SoFi Stadium. They really think that he was their best option when they're swimming in those day 3 quarterback waters, and they didn't want to run the risk of missing out on him being their backup. Now, there is the option to carry 3, right, because the new emergency quarterback rule brought back this year. So maybe Rippon as a veteran could round out that room, although given all the other uncertainty, Lance, at other positions on the roster, I'd be surprised if the Rams continue to roll with 3 quarterbacks on their active roster. That's definitely a leading storyline for training camp, whether Bennett can just pin it down and prove himself able and ready to back up Stafford.
Well, with a guy like Cooper Kupp, Triple Crown receiver, Super Bowl MVP-esque, he's a guy, right? When you go against defenses, and a lot of defenses, they're going to say, okay, let's take away this guy. Let's roll up a corner. Let's put a safety over top, double coverage, whatever the case may be. And they do a good job in taking away from him, and the targets will be limited. Who is the second guy? Is it Van Jefferson? Is it Tyler Higbee? Who is the second guy in the passing game that if all goes to fail and everybody's 3 people are on Cooper Kupp, which sometimes that's what it takes, who's going to be the next guy to get down the field and do some havoc and cause some damage in the passing game?
I think it's absolutely the right question to be asking, and I don't mean to dismiss it by saying I don't know. I just think that is so high atop the list of preseason questions for the Rams, and I think there are some candidates, including Van Jefferson, who when he has been right, when that knee has not been bothering him, he's shown some really high-end potential, and I think he is a wide receiver, too, in this league. But you could also look back in a couple of months and say, were the Rams telling us something when they brought in veterans like Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson during OTAs? Were those just bodies to fill out, route trees and drills, or were those a glimpse into the future where they're saying, hey, we need some more of these wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 options, because Ben Skoranek, while he's had some great moments, may not be that guy. Because Puka Nacua, who we drafted out of BYU and we really like as a future Robert Woods-type player, may not be ready for a front-loaded schedule that features 4 Super Bowl contenders in the first 5 weeks. So, yes, Higbee is now the franchise's all-time leading receiving tight end. I'm glad that he's back. They now have a full tight end room for the first time in recent memory, where they could go 3 or maybe even 4 deep on an active roster at tight end. So all those options are available to Sean McVay. Whether he wants to play less 11 and get into more 2 back or 2 tight end sets, we shall see. But I think those are questions that are very much top of mind for him and for Mike LaFleur's new offensive coordinator. How do we get our most threatening 5 skill position players on the field at the right time?
We're talking with JB Long, Rams radio play-by-play announcer. JB, as we move to the defensive side of the ball, it goes back to how we started this conversation, because I think the youth movement is truly on full display on that side of the ball. They lose Leonard Floyd. Ashawn Robinson now comes here to the Giants. No Bobby Wagner, Troy Hill, Jalen Ramsey, Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott. You're clearly familiar with all these names. The reason I bring that up, I think anyone who's a casual football fan who takes a look at this Rams defensive depth chart, they would be very hard-pressed to be familiar with a handful of these names. So what I'm trying to pin up here is, who do you look at as a playmaker that maybe nobody's talking about that's going to emerge this season simply because of playing time around Aaron Donald or maybe on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You could probably get away with publishing a Rams defensive depth chart today that has J.B. Long, Lance Medow, and Jonathan Casillas on it.
Very true.
Jonathan
Yes.
in his prime. I mean, like Jonathan today.
The analyst, the year off of Achilles injury.
He's good for at least 2 snaps.
Maybe
2 snaps
2.
is the over-under, JB. Yes.
And my point is, to exactly what you said, there is so much unknown, and it's tough to part with Jalen Ramsey at this stage of his career. He gave the Rams so many elite years, and the way that he played through a 12-loss season last year, if you had doubts about the competitive fire or the integrity of Jalen Ramsey, I think he answered all of those as much or more last year as he did during the championship campaign from 2 years prior. You just can't replace someone like him around whom you can create the star position. He takes so much pressure off other defensive backs. You can just plug in complementary pieces. So who takes that lead role against the top receiver on each roster each week is very much in question. They are banking on Aaron Donald and a bunch of guys, at least externally. I can totally get that perception. Whether or not that's good enough, we'll see. I'm excited about Ernest Jones, who was drafted to be their inside linebacker of the future, then had the opportunity to be mentored by Bobby Wagner, who was Pro Football Focus's top-graded inside linebacker again last season. Wagner goes back to Seattle. Now it's year 3 for Jones, and it's like, okay, take this Ram by the horns. You're going to wear the green dot. It's got to be through you. I think between Donald in the middle, Jones in the center, and then Jordan Fuller, who has had some unbelievable moments as a center field safety, gives you a good spine to that defense. On the edge, outside a corner, in the slot, everything else is up for grabs.
I'm looking at this DB room coached by my former roommate, Aubrey Pleasant, from University of Wisconsin. And also Raheem Morris, the Jersey guy, is the defensive coordinator, is a good friend of mine as well. Who is the corner? Who's the top? Who's corner number 1? I'm looking at these corners and I'm like, ugh, I don't really know these guys. Who is cornerback number 1 for the Rams, man? Who's going to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe we should get your former roommate on the line and get a true feel for how they see the depth chart coming out of OTAs. But I will say, and Jonathan, I'd be curious for your perspective on this. As much as we're hyper-focused on rookies this time of year, like this is the rookie time, their first training camp, I get it, the buzz, the excitement. So often in my experience, it's been the sophomores who rise to the occasion this time of year. They've had a full season of experience. They've gone through an off-season program. They've had a taste. They've probably taken some lumps. this is where they differentiate themselves as long-term future pros or just guys who were drafted. And I think that's true of a lot of guys in the secondary and especially in the corner group. Kobe Durant was sensational last year. He led the National Football League in interception return yards, and he did it in very limited duty. Darion Kendrick was his running mate as a rookie corner, was pressed into duty probably earlier than he was ready for, and he got torched. So can he bounce back from that? He had another great offseason camp. I think he's a candidate to really step up and fill some of Jalen Ramsey's reps. Robert Rochelle is kind of a lingering 2021 draft pick who was a starter for a moment, then kind of regressed. Could have used him last year, was nowhere to be found. And then the other name I'll throw at you is Trey Hodges-Tomlinson, and I think he might prove to be the defensive gem of this class. He had all the elite ball skills. He had all the accolades at TCU. If he's 2 inches taller, he's probably going 2 rounds higher. The Rams think they got a steal here, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting sooner rather than later.
JB, before we let you go, it's a topic that obviously Jonathan knows since he contributed on special teams. It's the overlooked facet in football. And normally I wouldn't maybe emphasize this, but you look at the special teams unit, you've got a punter drafted in the 7th round this year. You've got an undrafted kicker. The long snapper is new, who's also an undrafted player. They completely revamped all the specialists. What does that mean for the outlook of that unit, especially if you have so much youth also on the defensive side of the ball and you're trying to play a game of field positioning here this year?
Yeah, I think it shows they're not planning to kick this year. Maybe kick off. They're not going to punt or kick any field goals. They're just going for everything. But, yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that group, Giant great Chase Blackburn as their new special teams coordinator. And when I met him this offseason, I kind of wrote a little piece about how he's a coach to watch, not just because of his individual potential, but because you could make the case he's the most instrumental assistant coach on the Rams for the 2023 season because they were completely turning over their special teams unit and their 3 specialists, because this young roster, more than half rookie, was going to show up at training camp this summer in Irvine, California. And those marginal decisions, those who gets a helmet on game day, the 48 and the 53, those are often conversations where they look at the special teams coach and you say, okay, you tell us who you need in your sport, in your core special teams groups, because if we like them enough as position players, we will prioritize giving them a roster spot over someone else who the fans might know because they catch footballs or take handoffs, but they don't do anything for us in the kicking game. So I always go to training camp with this mindset, but more so here in 2023 than ever before. I will write down the name and the number of everyone who's running with the first-team kicking units, because those are the guys who are probably going to be appearing in Week 1 in Seattle.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it will be interesting to see the state of the Rams by the time, of course, they visit the Giants in Week 17 to wrap up 2023. He is the Rams radio play-by-play announcer, JB Long. JB, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much for the insight, and look forward to talking to you down the road.
Thank goodness we don't have to revisit anything I just said or hold me accountable until New Year's.
There you go. See, we gave you some leeway and flexibility in that department.
Erase it from the data bank. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your show.
Hey, you as well,
All
JB.
right, JB.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. JB Long breaking down the state of the L.A. Rams, the ins and outs of a very young team, and the Giants certainly have been there and done that with respect to when they have turned over the roster. Lance Medow, Jonathan Casillas with you here. This is Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We're going to open up the phone lines. I know we were heavy emphasis on interviews over the course of the program at 201-939-4513. Bob is in Pennsylvania. He joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Bob? What do you got for us?
Oh, hi, guys. They told me I might not be able to get on, but I'm glad that I got on.
Sure. So what's on your mind?
Okay. I just want to make a statement I got to vent a little on this subject. I know you're not going to comment on it at all, but if Saquon Barkley does not sign that tender, and you got to sit down with him and say, do you want to be here or do you want us to release you? I say Dalvin Cook is just as good. A healthy Dalvin Cook is just as good, and see if Dalvin Cook would be happy to be
Well, first
here.
of all, I think you're worrying about something that's never going to come to fruition because Saquon is not sitting out the entire season. Nobody has done that other than Le'Veon Bell, Bob. So
Yeah.
you're talking about one individual that has ever sat out and sacrificed an entire season.
It just seemed. I seen an interview just before the deadline. It was on YouTube, and he just didn't look very happy about the situation.
He's not happy. And I wouldn't be either. I don't think you would be either if you were going to receive half of what you should have probably received. And we're talking about millions of dollars. $10 million is literally less than half of what he wanted to receive and should receive for that guaranteed money up front.
They've been trying to sign him, though, since the bye week. And I believe they would have tagged Daniel Jones if they had signed him. And him saying that he wants to be a Giant for life, he's just not showing it. Did Dexter Lawrence get the most he could have got as being like the best defensive tackle?
Well, the market is completely different, though. It's not a fair comparison. Look at what defensive linemen are getting compared to running backs. It's on
We're
opposite
lucky
ends
if
of
the running
spectrum.
backs don't go on strike. Like, seriously, it's a travesty what they're doing to the running backs. And you're talking about the top players in the league. These are tremendous athletes that lead teams. Saquon led the Giants to the playoffs last year, and he understands that. But the market is kind of screwing the whole running back club, So it's that particular position. I think right now it's like the talk of the NFL because it's not right what's going on. I think with the running backs.
I don't think if you're going to compare it to other positions, the proportion of it, but. It's like you can't blame the Giants for this. I'm sure that they did. They tried to be more than fair to him. Just like a guy like Sterling Shepard. I think he gets it. He's a guy who's going to be a Giant for life. I believe he'll be doing something with the organization 10 years from now because he wants to be here. And he's shown. I mean, what is Sterling Shepard making?
Yeah, but Shepard. But see, here's why your comparisons are not fair, Bob. Shepard got a second contract
he's
already.
hurt.
And he's way past his prime.
Correct. Saquon is looking for his second contract coming off a rookie deal. So once again, you're throwing in random players, and I don't think you're understanding the economics and how different they are.
And Lance, it's just that do you want him to sit out and not come to training camp and then? Maybe he's going to show up week one.
I'm telling you, I don't know how to say it any different way. And, Bob, appreciate the phone call. Saquon Barkley is not sitting out the entire 2023 season.
Well, and then also training camp with the I guess the last CBA, they're going to fine him more per day if he sits out, but he also has the option to sit in where he's actually going to meetings and in the facility but not practicing.
We've seen
I
players
think
do that.
that's the option that Saquon's going to go.
Well, but here's the bottom line. If he does hold out, if you want to word it that way. I mean, technically, until you sign the tender, you're not under any obligation to show up because, once again, you're not a member of the roster.
Right.
There's just a placeholder. But I brought up last year, if you recall, Orlando Brown Jr., Kansas City Chiefs, and he's now with the Bengals. He was given the franchise tag, like any other player, Jonathan, right? He wanted a long-term deal. He didn't show up until August. And then he reported and took part a little bit in training camp and the season started. And most guys do that who get the tag, right? I mean, you've been around teammates that were tagged.
I expect that to happen.
Right.
You know,
that's
maybe he'll
usually
take
the
a couple
blueprint.
fines, but like I said, the sit-in thing, because I think Saquon is a locker room guy, but I just feel like he is, kind of falling victim to that running back market that's just plummeted.
100%.
Which I never really liked that. I don't understand that. I was always a person, an advocate for people getting paid what they're worth.
Sure.
And the value of Saquon Barkley is not what the Giants are trying to give him. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. Like Daniel Jones is great. He's a great quarterback. Yes, and I think he's tremendous. He's not the best player in the New York Giants. Offensively, it's Saquon Barkley. And you could throw Andrew Thomas in there as well. And he's going to get paid the money that he deserves. Saquon's probably never going to get that with this franchise being there. And then next year, they're probably going to franchise him again. So that's where we're at right now with Saquon. I don't know if the guaranteed numbers that the Giants ever presented to him were more than the 2-year franchise tags in a row, which we talked about this ad nauseum on this show.
Oh, have we ever?
Right? So look, we all love Saquon. I don't think he's gonna miss anything. In terms of games, maybe he'll miss a practice here or two in training camp, but he's definitely going to be getting that ball week 1 versus Dallas Cowboys.
Well, and also from Saquon's perspective, he knows the offense. It's not a new scheme. So if he misses training camp, it's not the end of the world from that standpoint. I'm not saying that everybody's hoping he misses training camp, but this is the facts. And then the second thing is he's not going to play much at all in the preseason, even if there wasn't a contractual issue.
If anything, I don't think he's getting any carries in the preseason.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, who plays their notable running backs? You think Christian McCaffrey is going to be thrown out there for the San Francisco 49ers? Kyle Shanahan's like, yeah, sure, take on some extra hits during the preseason.
We just got to give you $30 million guaranteed.
So the real stuff begins in week 1, at least in terms of the dynamics of how it impacts the Giants from an X's and O standpoint. But as you were hitting on, I'll give you the perfect example, Jonathan. In 2012, and I was talking to Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears, he was given the franchise tag. I had him on my Sirius XM show. That year, okay, so we're talking about a decade ago, the franchise tag for running backs was just over $7 million. It's just over $10 million. That means a $3 million difference in the span of over a decade. Quarterbacks, okay, that year the tag was $16 million. For quarterbacks, it's $32 million. Quarterbacks have doubled. Running backs has gone up $3 million. That's all you need to know in terms of the running back market compared to the other positions. And this is not just the Giants. These are the 31 other teams.
Yep.
They all see what happens with the market. And very few running backs, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, received long-term deals with some guaranteed money. Everybody else is working off of either a rookie contract or maybe a one-year deal.
Bijan Robinson is getting $21.5 million guaranteed, but he was the number 2 pick overall.
But let's see what happens when his rookie contract expires. We're going to have this conversation all over again, right?
He might be looking for, y'all not even going to give me what I got my rookie year?
Who knows?
You know, but I want to go back to one of the callers earlier, and I've heard this, and I don't know if I agree with this saying that the NFC's wide open. I don't know if I agree with that, especially not this year.
Well, JB Long brought that up.
We saw what the Eagles did last year. Did they just fall off the face of the earth? Like, you know me, last year I was thinking about, man, that Eagles game coming up down the line. I was so nervous about them because they're such a solid team. Sure. How is the NFC wide open when it runs through Philadelphia? It runs through Philadelphia. And you can even throw Dallas in there as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Because you can go them 1A and whatever, 1B, whatever the case is, completely 1 and 2.
Yeah.
These are really good teams that are going to be really good this year.
I think, to his point, and this is where I stand, and I'm with you, I still think there's separation. I'd put Philadelphia and Dallas as setting the tone. I think, though, after that, it's fair to say we could have brand new wild card teams this year.
Right. So they're talking about the playoff spots, basically,
correct. Yeah,
right?
But, I mean, when you think about it, 7 teams make the playoffs, Jonathan. If you're penciling in Philadelphia and Dallas, okay, that's 5 spots still up for grabs.
I got that. Okay, cool.
So
I would
that's
throw
where
the
I look
Niners
at it.
in there, too.
No, Niners, too, but all things considered, Pearson, the quarterback situation, I don't know how that's going to play out.
They're not a lot.
Listen, I love the running game. I think they have a great defense. Could those 2 facets get them in? 100%. You never know. Could Purdy do what he did last season? Is he going to stay healthy? Trey Lance off the injury? Remember, they don't have the security blanket known as Jimmy Garoppolo anymore.
Right.
So I'll throw in San Francisco as maybe 1C using your rankings. But the point is, the North, Aaron Rodgers is not there anymore. Could the Lions take it a step further? Sure. Minnesota won 11 games by 1 score. Could they take a step back? Absolutely. We were talking about the NFC South earlier. There could be a new sheriff in town there. San Francisco and Seattle, I would expect them to be able to be in the same region of where they were last season. So I think maybe outside of the top 3 teams, that's where I think it's wide open.
Okay, cool.
That's how I would
the
survey
field. I get that. But, for people keep saying, the NFC's wide open, no, it's not.
No, there are still contenders.
There's a top
there
dog
are contenders.
in the NFC, and he stands alone. It stands alone. I'm sorry to say it. My Giants fan is the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw them 3 times last year. Y'all remember what they did to us, right? It runs through Philadelphia. I'm sorry. And if the Giants can go ahead and beat them, now we can make some noise.
Well, the NFC East is going to be some battle royale, given the fact that, like you said, there's not a lot of fall-off we're anticipating within the division because most of these teams are bringing back what they had last season, specifically a Philadelphia and a Dallas. And speaking of that, those are the final 2 teams left over in terms of our previews. So thank you for the wonderful segue to wrap up the program here on Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We'll be back up and running again at 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. And a reminder that Big Blue Kickoff Live, as well as the rest of our podcasts, are part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcasts. For Jonathan Casillas, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Thursday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.